Now, one of the defining features of any plane, Miss Ashley, actually any plane, is the cockpit canopy area. And I want to be sure, somewhere in this tape, we still have a few loose ends to tie up before we start the cockpit canopy. I want to look at all the choices. I have some really exotic ideas that I don't know if they're going to work or not, but we're certainly going to give them a try. Or we're going to know at the end of this tape that they don't work, either one way or the other. Now, Tsunami had one of the sexiest kind of canopies, I don't know, I guess I ever can imagine, but it's very similar, in fact, and eerily similar to Miss Ashley. And I'm just looking at several of the some of the air racers, the way they've treated the canopy. They've obviously cut it down for minimum wind resistance. And we want to try to get, even though we can't make a scale copy of this, to get the feel of that rear set, bubbly kind of canopy. Now, what I always do before I start any cockpit area, I want to look at what all the planes look like so I can come up with the best mind's eye view of what I want to see in the finished model. The thing with most of the Reno air races is they're all custom one-of-a-kind deals. Very few of them replicate into another airplane, which makes it even more difficult to model. But there's a look at that Reno type cockpit that no matter which version you choose, and I don't know that they're even commercial units, it really has a sexy look. And I hope we're going to be able to get something similar to that going on Miss Ashley. The Sea Furies of using these modified canopies that are really cut down, so basically just the pilot's eyes are sitting up over the horizon. They're really cut down very, very much from stock. And capturing that look, it's that look of the rear set cockpit that I like so much. There's something about that rear set cockpit, I don't know, it just really grows on me. And I had thought at one time, one of my original ideas was I was going to try to make this similar to the Seafire, where the cockpit opened, and I could make a removable cockpit, maybe that held in with an Allen screw or a piece of Velcro, and then just open the cockpit and take the canopy detail out. You can take the details out when you fly the plane. Well, yeah, I don't know. And then I thought, well, I'll glue the canopy on. That'll make it nice and aerodynamic, and get it out through the bottom through the pipe tunnel. See, in this case, we have the modified Miss Ashley bottom scoop that has the, I'll call it the curve from front to back. This is just before the plane actually crashed and killed Gary Levitz, in fact. So anyway, some of the choices, I like to look at all the angles. First thing I'm going to have to do is finish about a 5-minute job to put the rudder into that back block, because that rudder is going to set the canopy position. And unfortunately, because thanks to a Fred Cronwet, we have plenty of pictures showing the details that we want to model, including the scoop, the NASCAR, whatever you want to call it, the scoop from the front. But anyway, for right now, it's going to be get that rudder on. I'm not going to bother with the tail fillets right now because I want to get the canopy set in position and start to figure out whether I'm going to be able to take it out through the bottom, the top, or if I can't do it at all. It's no sin to just give up and do it the old-fashioned way. One of the things I always seem to have had over the years is nice cockpit detailing. And in the case of the Seafire, I think world-class detailing, and the Spitfire. All that stuff is on video, of course. But we're gonna because of several other factors, one of them being that we're building we're in effect almost building 2 aeroplanes here, and the development time, we like to look at the possibility of keeping the canopy as simple as possible, possibly keeping it down to just a few days of work. And that, in effect, might help a lot of modelers or give them some inspiration, as opposed to doing one of the super-duper detailed jobs that, in my case, in this case of the Seafire, took about 2 months to do. Anyway, we're going to go get that rudder on, get down, and get started on laying this out. And before I start the cockpit and start laying it out and think of the many options I have, I need to cut a notch in here and make sure when I set this in that it's dead 90 degrees straight. In other words, what I don't want to have happen. Here's a couple of the things like the do's and don'ts. Don't ever just glue this to the top of a top block, because it's an end grain joint. It's very weak. I'm going to try not to get it one side or the other, obviously nice and straight. And obviously the other thing is the hinge line straight up and down. I don't want to have it like that or like that. I need to get it in real good alignment. And then cut the rest of the hinge pockets, which I already cut on the previous tape. So just cutting this up. This now, when this is finalized and fitted in here, this then sets me up for where and how big the canopy can be. So I need to get this done. This is really an off-the-camera kind of quickie thing. Just cut that notch, lay it out nice and straight with a piece of 1/8 inch tape. Get it so that it's just a press fit in, and then when I take this apart, I'll get inside and Dremel out all the extra wood. And that's the way I've done on non-take-apart planes. On a take-apart plane, it's even easier. Just makes it one step easier. Little tips that I've found are very helpful in laying out, getting a rudder straight. First thing is lay a piece of masking tape, the thickness of the rudder. In this case, it's 1/4 inch. Lay it right down the fuselage, the whole length, almost the whole length of the fuselage. Now, the reason for that is you want to be able to look down the whole fuselage length and see that it's in the middle. See, the longer you can make the tape, the less chance there is that you'll get it in on an angle. What I want to do is on each side of this tape, lay another piece of tape. And this gives you a rough idea of where that notch is going to go. I've been thinking about this cockpit for so long. I hope it's going to be kind of a neat thing. Anyway, we'll try our best. Now once you pull this tape out, that's the notch I need to cut. And it should be relatively straight. That is an excellent way to lay out any kind of a centerline notch, even a carving thing. Always good to cut this a little on the underside. And then using a sanding block or like a nail file, Bud McKnight sanding stick deal. See, that's undersized now. I'm going to need to just fine-tune that cut. Another thing I want to be real conscious of, because it still isn't glued in, is that I have a nice, perfectly straight hinge line, and that it's straight in the other dimension before I tack it in. And it looks like that joint worked out well, except in here I'm going to need a little filler block. That's no problem. And I have pretty much just gotten, I guess I've lucked out is the word, gotten that to fit in there relatively nice on the first shot. I want it to be straight, obviously, this way, because before I tack it in, I can just make fine adjustments, see? And what I can do here is I can use a 90-degree triangle off of the fuselage side, or, because I know the fuselage, all the formers are cut 90 degrees, I can line it up that way before I actually make the tack. Since I know the wing center line is parallel to my glass table, a 90-degree triangle is a good double check. And what I always do, see, I can line that up. Now I only have it tacked in position. Once I'm happy with the tack, and I know this is going to be relatively close right now, then I can go and run that glue seam and make up that little filler block. I mean, there's a lot of ways of doing it, but usually the 90-degree triangles don't lie. And if that thing is crooked, boy, it looks terrible. I mean, I've made several planes after I was all done. Didn't I check that? That's a good way to check it. Little block to fill in that extra little gap there, and I'll take this apart and sand it all nice and clean. Fitting and sanding this up, I realized I had put that last hinge would almost stick out the bottom. I just filled that back in with a block. And we're ready, finally. I am ready to go pull this little piece off and hollow and glue the hole inside of it. And then tomorrow we should be ready for canopy details. Now with this little piece I can get right in here with the thin CA. And then I can get in with the old Dremel and Dremel out all that extra rudder that's sticking down in there. Get as much of that extra wood in there. Get that out if possible. Being able to get inside here and get out all this little extra weight, I bet I've gotten almost a gram out. Anyway. It really is nice. I keep wanting to make a list of the advantages of take-apart construction and the disadvantages, and it always seems like it's a one-on-one. Extra long bits are real handy, even though I only like to run them on a slow speed because these are kind of beat up from being in the machine shop. But they allow you to get way inside where you normally would be difficult to get. Get out that last little bit of weight that's in there. And everything left to do is a final sanding on this. I'm not going to have enough time the way this day worked out with all the shop work, but I do want to lay out the canopies in place. What I did, I bought one of every SIG canopy that I could even hope that would someday or somehow I could make use of. I have one of every size, and we'll try to position them. At least go to bed tonight with some ideas of how we're going to lay this out. Again, this is one of the little parts of the plane that you don't think about. I was thinking this would go a lot quicker, but now that it's done, making the second one, now that I know all the little pitfalls, making a second one will certainly be a lot quicker. See if I could run a tube. I sharpened up the end of a tube here so that I could run it in through the former and connect it to the back of this little 256 Allen screw so that I would have a way of getting into that bolt. Now, I know that, you know, obviously I could go in through the bottom, but I just have a feeling that's not going to be the way I want to do it. So I'm going to give this a try to make a tube in almost a straight line there so that I can get in with that screw when I want to take this apart, and then the only thing you'll see is a little fixture, a little outlet out here. It seems to happen. I started out thinking I'll just run that piece of tubing all the way in there because I need to be able to get in there with the wrench and tighten and loosen that bolt. So I originally, it's funny, I really thought I'd put a whole tube through there, and I said, geez, I don't need it the rest of the way, because to get that screw in there, obviously what's going to have to happen, you've got to put a little drop of CA or something on there. But I can just picture what a pain in the neck that's going to be doing that. And then to have to tighten that screw up. So anyway, I hope, and if the screw falls out, it'll fall into the great abyss beyond. So that's one more problem. And it basically ate the better part of, look, the screw already fell in there. It ate the better part of what I thought was going to be a time I could work on the canopy. So what I'm going to do is just leave the canopy go till tomorrow. This looks like a good way to do it. That'll keep the edge. Kazzy just has a little hole in his, but the problem is if you have an edge, as soon as you touch that, the paint's going to chip and oil's going to soak in and everything. So I like the idea of having that little tube in there. Run that in, adjust the thing, take it out. And I guess we'll work on canopies tomorrow. Okay, I'm looking forward to it, and I'll be thinking about it tonight. Okay, today what I did, I lined up all the canopies I had. I ordered, let's see, 2, 4, 6 from SIG, one of every size. They're all the same basic Reno Air Race shape, but I have one of every size they make. Hey, this is cool. They call them Pro Hardware. Wonder where they got that name from. Anyway, And for buying all the various sizes, because a lot of times the canopy just looks a little too small, a little too big. And I know this is going to be the general shape. So, because and these things are really inexpensive anyway. So, by having them in stock, it's going to allow me to. We'll see how would it look with a little bit bigger canopy, a little bit smaller canopy. Gives me a lot of choices. Now the Red Baron has kind of a, this design of canopy. I don't know, the Reno Air Race type. And of course, one of the comments I've heard over the years from Strega is, you should have met the canopy further back. You should have made a bigger canopy. Talk is cheap. And I criticize poor old Kent Tyser for having the canopy too big. So now if I make the canopy too big, I know Kent's going to jump all over me. But you always want to get the first decision before you can make any canopy details is how big is the canopy going to be. Then if you've watched the Spitfire videos, you'll know, the Seafire video, I'm sorry, that I spent almost a whole day trying to figure out how far forward or back, because if it's even a little bit too far back, it starts to look like a collie with a big nose. Too far forward and it starts to look like a saber jet. And we're trying to get a look here, but in essence we can't make it exactly scale. We have to do this kind of magic trick to make it look right when it isn't right. But it's that overall canopy placement. Now this one is going to be a little bit different. I want to try to make it even more scale, and I'm still hoping I'm going to be able to make a removable cockpit that I can plug into each plane, or when I go to the team trials I can just leave it out since they don't seem to appreciate any kind of canopy detail. And boy, I'll tell you, over and over I say, I really wish I had the time to make one of these removable or slidable things like I made, trying to simulate Keith Trossel's MB5, but this year making 2 fuselages, it's just not going to happen. But I think that would be so cool to have that and leave it open while you're flying it. Planes like the Spitfires, you can fly them with the canopy open. The plane I owned, the Air Coupe, used to fly it all the time with the canopy slid back. Cool as, especially on a cold day. And if you're really interested in some super ultra detailing job, I think the best one by far is the Seafire one, but hey, each one we try to make a little bit better. First step is I'll open up all these packages and kind of look at, just trying to lay them up there and get a little feel for which one I'm going to like the best. And whichever one I like the best, obviously I'll order another one for the other fuselage, or however this is going to evolve. See, this is the part I really enjoy the most, is how is it going to evolve? We don't know. It's still a mystery. So, like watching a movie and you don't know the ending. Now, by lining up all the canopies right near the fuselage, what this is going to give me a chance to do is just get an overall view of which one of these I'm going to use. I've got from 9 to 14. Of these 6 canopies, I'm hoping one of them is going to be, well, something that we can use. I have this tremendous, I laugh when I say it. What I always do is go back and look at the previous couple of years of videos to get ideas, because I always forget things too. And as I'm sitting here, I'm looking at the Strega canopy, of course, and sitting here with this, with a nice little pair of scissors, trying to trim this up and trying to decide where it's going to go. But it's always good while you're doing that, have the old VCR cranking along. Hey, that's what you have a video library for. That's how you get the best use out of it, because it's a reminder in time. As we all get older, we all forget. Hey, it's the truth. Things I always have had trouble with in the past is I always have dull scissors because they cut fiberglass. This year I really showed my intelligence level by getting a pair of dedicated scissors and keeping these just for doing things like canopies that you don't wear out the scissors. Once you cut a couple of sheets of fiberglass with these scissors, they're shot now. Boy, it's a real treat having sharp scissors. Now, of course, they make scissors for cutting fiberglass, but I just don't happen to have them. I just keep replacing the scissors I have. Anyway, this is the part now that just gets time consuming. Is how far forward does this need to be? Is it too wide? Is it too high? Can we lower it? Can we lower it in the back? Would it look good from the side if it was lower? Yeah, probably. Now, when I want to, now that I have the whole lip cut off, when I want to lower this, which is exactly the case, I'll lay some masking tape, let's say 1/4 inch masking tape around the whole perimeter, then I can cut along the masking tape And once I have this shape, now see it's not sticking on there yet, but once I get the shape, in fact I ought to get the shape first. This needs it, and I just do this by eye. Just take a little bit out of the front, because I want, this is the smallest one. I figured I'd start with the smallest one. These Reno Air Race canopies are really a major focal point of the plane that define it from being a race plane and not a military plane. Okay, it's just, needs to be taken down in the front. But this is the part, a lot of people, it makes them crazy when you can't get a nice fit and they only give you one canopy in the box, and then you're screwed. So you want to take just a little bit. Oh, here we go. You want to do just one little bit at a time. Notice I bought 6 canopies just in case. Evaluation is that, first off, it's not long enough and it sits up too high relative to the real canopy. The part, and we're probably going to have to just use the front of the canopy. I can see this and carve this block out of balsa wood because it's a very long, see the taper on all these canopies is correct up to this point, but then it just goes right down. We need this to taper out a lot longer. So I'm going to cut the next size bigger one up, get a feel for, because I'm probably only going to use it, this is the stuff you don't know obviously till you take the canopies out of the bag, but to get this piece right, that'll save me from having to make a mold and having Midgley make all this molded parts and delay the thing a couple more weeks. And then if I make this piece out of balsa wood and hollow it out, I can use it to make a mold for the carbon body thing. Just make, see, I didn't want to make this part of the carbon fiber body mold because I want to have the choice of turning this into another plane. I want to be able to have it, that same plug of the mold for other planes. All right, let me work on the next bigger one. It'd be fine if this piece tapered back. So what I want to do before I go any further though is I want to trim some of this down, and I want to do it equally. So I'll take out some 1/8 inch tape, since I have a relatively good fit anyway, and I want to take an 1/8 inch or so, maybe a little more than an 1/8 inch off the whole part and let it sit down further into the plug. And you can change the whole look of the plane just by taking a canopy and lowering it into the fuselage. To me, it looks kind of, well, not in keeping with a Reno Airs, when it's and like in the case of some planes, they want to have a bubble like a Malcolm hood. Well, but in this case, I don't. I want to have the look of that Reno Air Race look. Point is, you can trim, in this case is what I just did, you can trim the back down, and that controls this front. In other words, I don't want this to be a 90-degree angle. I want it to kind of be aerodynamic. So what I'm doing is just trimming more off the back than off the front. This is the kind of fine-tuning thing and looking at the pictures, why you need pictures and videos and everything. Because once this is right, it really is dynamite. But if it's wrong for every time you look at the plane. You want to just put your finger in a vise and tighten it. The canopy, I want these to be kind of parallel and equal. So if I sight down, I see there's a little high spot there. I'd like it to be equal, of course. I don't want the canopy to be sitting on there all anything other than as straight as I possibly can make it. See, as I'm laying out the tape here, I can look through and see, uh-oh, I don't have this one right. And I can just peel the tape up and look right through the glass. And that helps me get it equal. Now, I've taken a lot more off the back because I want to get this to lay back as much as possible. I'm really glad I have sharp scissors and that tape to give as an alignment. You can actually use the same canopy to create a lot of different looks. Now see, this would almost be a totally different canopy. As I lay this back into the plane, it changes this angle. Now it's very close to being what the scale model is. It's given me pretty much the angle I want, but I still need to, I want to take a little more off. I want that to really lay back if possible. Again, I'm really getting fussy here. Most people wouldn't even bother with this. They glue the canopy on, but to get that look, to me, that's a focal point of the plane. And that'll set me up then to carve that block. By the time we get the angle that I'm looking for, obviously it's way too short. I need to get even a little bit more off here. See, I'm pushing it all the way. And then I'll figure out with tape where I want this to end, and that'll set me up for the block. time I finish this, there's almost no canopy left here. Now I need to mask this off, and by looking at the side, I don't want it to go down. I want it to be that it'll taper right into the block. This trick in stunt was this is sticky back sandpaper, and I know it works good. I can just use that to set the final little shape, and I know I'll have a pretty realistic shaping in. And you can see any spot that's not been sanded. It gives us a pretty good cut, and obviously the thing we're looking for is a real nice even. And getting this angle right is a little bit of an ordeal too, but I'll get it. I just moving this tape about 50 times already before I make the final cut. Save this if we're going to make some kind of little open cockpit plane like a Vico Chief or something. This would be all set to go. Finally wind up with, well, the basis of what we want. Now I just need to make sure that when I set this on the fuselage that I have this angle right. I don't want it to be sticking up or sticking down. And it's hard to pick that shape up, but I have the choice of if I lower it down, but then the front sticks up. It's like the next thing I have to do is lay out this block, or get a piece of scrap wood and get an idea how big that block should be. Spending a lot of time trying to figure out how I want to do this and get this look that I'm after. It would pay to look through my box of these little Spitfire canopies. Some of the other, just for some other ideas, I got some, these are all the ones that Dave Midgley made. Different shapes, because I'm really not totally convinced I have the right look, and these aren't going to work. But always saving all your spare canopies, obviously, this is a noble canopy. Obviously, look at this, obviously the phone is ringing. Let me get the phone. Oh, I wound up taking the original one and going down one size smaller to the smallest one I had here. Because what it gave me, it had a little bit better taper in the front. So I'm basically going to work with this one now, repeat all the things of cutting it all in. The other thing I like is, see, the real Miss Ashley, let me just place this in the center, doesn't come down flat here. There's a taper in it, and I'll be able to carve that block. It has a ridge that runs along the edge of the whole canopy. That ridge is what see, it's thinner. That ridge is important because these fillets are going to fare into that ridge ultimately. See, I need to get that ridge along the side. Otherwise, that other canopy would have left almost no ridge at all. A lot of this is just give and take. It's the mind's eye where you have to make these decisions, and none of them are actually scale. But this is my best shot right now with what I have. One way to lay out the turtle deck, and I just thought of this. I laid a piece of wood. I can make a side profile of this before I even cut a block. And I can adjust it up and down. Just lay a side block on there and get some idea of how long that has to be. And I'm going to make it a little bit, obviously make it a lot oversized. Now see, I'll make this plenty oversized, and then I can just trim it down. But that gives me some kind of an idea of what the side view would be like, leaving plenty of room overage. I also know the width, the rough width, and I'll leave a little bit extra on that too. Again, that really something I need to fine tune here. So let me cut that block up and start getting it carved up. Okay, it looks like we got that block at least roughed out, as rough as I care to do it this time. One of the things, the tricks, I guess is the right word, of carving any block like this where you don't really know the final shape is make it plenty big. Because it's always easier to carve it down a bit. Always easier to buy pens that write. But the point is, I know this is going to be on the big side, but I'd much rather have it big and then I can sink it down or trim the bottom rather than the other way around. Then I had to make this block. I actually made it, I forgot to put a curve in it the first time. I want to have a very slight angular curve. And of course this, if this meets up, I'll leave the line on so I have a little bit of extra material and just have a very slight curve in this. This will be relatively simple, nothing simple to carve. Of course, the first thing I want to do is, any carving like this, is get rid of the corners first. But again, the whole trick with any of these parts, and I've done it so many times that I've tried to make them exactly the right size the first time, and then I wind up carving them over. If anything, make them a little bit too big. Especially in this case where we're going to have to make the part over and over again, or some amount of times over anyway. Anyway, once I can start to get that round, then I can start to feel what that shape. And I do most of it, I try to do it with my hand, not by eye. The final cutting and the final carving, the last little bit, I always want to make sure I have that plane on a 45-degree angle. If it's 90, you take kind of an unknown cut, I'll call it. It tends to catch in a wood grain. 45 degrees. And always make the plug, the part, oversized to begin with. That is so, well, I wish I had $1 for every time I said, oh, I'll get it right on the first shot. I go to put it in, it's a 1/16 of an inch too small. See, I'm a little bit over on that side. And this cockpit is evolving now. I really didn't know if we were going to be able to use this canopy until you actually physically lay it out. And since I have to make 2 of these, what I may as well do is make a mold out of this so I can mold the second part. I don't have to do another carving and hollowing job. We're almost at the end of this session anyway, so it won't even matter. I'll just sand this out and this will become a plug for a mold. And it's ready for a, well, I hope a final sanding. Some sanding anyway. I want to see if I have almost got the shape that I want here. Can be close. And that from the side, now see from the side it's not exactly right. This is kind of sticking up. I need to take a little bit of that off. Okay, see, every dimension is oversized here now. And once I mold a piece off of it, it'll even be more because I have to make up for this, oops, this little dimension here. A little slice off, I wanted to shorten it some, and what I'll save this for is so I can use this actually to put on a plans for a little cross-sectional reference. That's that same old thing, constantly adjusting it. I've shortened it. Now I know when I make the mold I'm going to leave a little extra because I may just need that little piece of wood there. But even if I were to mold that piece and need that, I could just glue it on to a little shim. But for right now, that's ready to make up a mold. Just to tack glue this onto a piece of scrap wood. This is a piece we were using to make one of the other molds. Not a good piece of balsa wood, we don't need it. Piece glued on nice and solid. Now I just go to the jigsaw, cut the perimeter out, make sure the angle is as close to 90 degrees as I can make it. Now with that part sawed off, I probably don't even really need a wire in a mold this small. But since we anticipate using it over and over again, I may as well make it as accurate as I can. Now I still need to get that wire to sit right in that groove, or just below it would even be a little better. So I want to sand, make sure that's plenty good. And I want to leave the dust on while I plant that wire in them, leaving as much dust on as possible. That little wire is what makes this mold very, very easy to work with. Very easy. No matter what size it is. Now the first thing I'm going to do is tack it in. Even if this isn't dead accurate, you can live with it. Because that wire is going to give us the parting line when we're done. As soon as that kicks, I'll pull the tape off and run the other two sides and get the wire on the other side also. Without that wire, it's real difficult to make these kind of molds work. Okay, now we're ready to soak up. I'm going to try to mold this at a 3/32. I probably could get away with 16th or something, but I'm going to try 3/32. Give me a little extra material of sand. And also to join around here, I need to put a little notch so that that canopy will blend right in the final blend. The trick here is cut the piece oversized, soak it with sudsy ammonia. All you need to make a little mold like this, some sudsy ammonia for the wood, a piece of A-grain wood a little bit oversized, and of course an ace bandage, and the best kind I found is the kind that stick to each other. Oh, they stick when they're new. This one's been used about 100 times. And ammonia, it doesn't seem to really matter if ammonia bothers you. You can really even use hot water. Just let it soak a lot longer. The ammonia seems to speed that up. In a bit, phew, this stuff stinks. As we soak this wood, I try to get it to bend. You really need A-grain wood. I'm almost sure this is going to split at the back, but try to work it into halfway into position. You can usually feel if part of it is, see, right up here, there's a stiff spot. So we'll use this for the back. Let that piece be up in the front. Just start working it and keep adding ammonia or water until you get that to be able to curve right around. Tip is, if you have a real stubborn piece of wood, or you don't, look at how this wood bends. If you don't, by the way, I'll give Al Rabe all the credit for coming up with some of these great ideas, and this is one I've just point blank used on every plane I've made in the last 6, 7, 8, 10 planes, I don't even know. But that wood becomes very, very pliable. You can also use steam. You can put gloves on and hold it over a steam, but it eventually, you don't even need the mold at some point in time. Now, once I get it to the point where I know it's going to cover the whole mold, now I expect it'll split in the back, but I'm not real nervous about that back. It looks like it's just going to make it, in fact, so I don't want to, see, I wouldn't want to have that. That's a problem. So I need to line up the front. Now I find figuring out how to make some of these molds, I don't know, I think it's very challenging anyway. Now I need to see that I'm covered in the back when I do that. And once I get it to that point, get a couple of these razor pins. That just holds it from sliding around while you're pulling that ace bandage. Now see, it's slipped a little bit already. And only because if we had an oversized piece of wood, but I'm probably going to use that whole amount. Now in the back, let's just see. Feel like it's going to split. It's certainly, yeah, there it goes. It's starting to split, but that's okay. That'll be able to be glued right up. Now, these two tails that hang off. See, what goes beyond the mold, I want to trim off right at this point in time. And you may think, oh, what's the point of making a little mold like this? Just carve 2 blocks. Well, you could carve 2 blocks, but the problem is they might not be exactly the same. By having a mold, well, there's I think a better chance that they'll be really nice or really exactly the same. And what happens once you make a plane that you're real happy with, you want to be able to, at least I do anyway, is replicate it, not just start from scratch again. And that wood will conform. If it doesn't, let it sit in some hot water, some ammonia. I like ammonia, but some people prefer hot water. Again, I watched Al Rabe make the Bearcat, the big fuselage side. Imagine carving that block out of a solid block of wood, or if there is some other way. It's probably more expensive or difficult. And anyway, tomorrow when we come back to the shop, we're done with this session. When we come back to the shop, we should have a part, and we could put the other part right in. or just make another part and then see which one is the lightest. Oh geez, a lot of choices here. A part that's 3/32, usually, almost always, you don't need any formers in it. Once that's got silk span and Brodeck dope on it. Again, a nice thing about molding is none of this is really, this is not like molding composite stuff where there's some secret high-tech stuff and nobody will tell you about it. This is, whether you're making a Nobler, and by the way, the other advantage to this is people that want to make a Miss Ashley, or they want to make a Strega or a Reno racer with this type of canopy, well, you run out and buy a SIG canopy, get me to mold them one of these little parts up, which I'll usually be able to do in a one-day turnaround. Put that up by the heating vent, let it sit up by the heating vent overnight. Tomorrow we'll have a good part. Perfect part, in fact, I hope. Always, I leave it by a heating vent overnight, and boy, tomorrow that'll be a usable part. And speaking of usable parts, now we've added to our, these are all the molds we have for various, in fact, Peabody's got a couple of there's more hooks up here where they used to have, I think there's 3 or 4 more anyway. But each time we add a mold to that part, one less thing that everybody down the road has to bother. You don't have to make the mold. Just get the part already molded. Well on the way to having something that's going to be kind of nice. Now today, once I took that away from the heating vent, I want to real carefully try to get it. You can see the little line that's inside. That'll be our trim line. Most of the time what I like to do is get a ballpoint pen line going down there. And once I have that trimmed off, I'll mark the mold what part this makes, and we can have an endless supply of Miss Ashley canopy backs. Or actually, for any Reno air race, this part would be just fine. I see it's not real, if you have good eyes, this doesn't even matter, but when you have eyes like hell windy here, you can hardly see anything. Okay, so with that on now, it's just a question of, you can see the trim line, and that's what that little wire imparts in there. You can trim off the excess and rub that on a sanding block, and that'll be ready to install. Love making these little molds. Always a good idea is to just leave the line on plus a little bit and do the last little bit with a sanding block. Or in this case, since it's a flat line, we can even do it with the belt sander. But don't try to get down to the last little bit right away. Just get the major amount of extra material off. Now let's pretend we wanted to make one of these for Kent Tyser or for somebody making a Reno air racer. Boom. In a matter of 2-3 minutes, it's done. And once I get close to the shape I want, the last little bit, I'll put that sticky back sandpaper over the fuselage top, and that'll give me the perfect angle. By the way, that is such a good tip. Place that it's split right in the back, just put 1 drop of CA on there and squeeze it together. And I can even sand the outside part of it. Important thing, it has this ridge that's very similar to the prototype. It looks like I can get it to end right about at the spot where we're going to, and this will be real handy if we can do that and not have it break, say, in the middle here. That'll just be one little additional thing we can accomplish. Piece of sticky back sandpaper in there. Oops. I can just get the bottom edge to pick up that curve. And I guess the back, the last little bit I'm going to have to do with a sanding block by hand. A good tip. Now I need to make a little bulkhead for here, but see, I don't have the angle right. I want to make this one self-contained little piece here and then get that set in place before I cut the opening for the cockpit details. Again, just taping it in place helps a lot. Now once I have this tacked in, I can run a bead And of course I tried to be real careful about getting it right in the center. Now one of the thoughts I had was that I could trace this out and cut that piece out, the piece of the shell that's underneath, but I left it in as a former, and it looks like that really stiffened it up. I was going to hollow that out, but figured the amount I'd take out I'd have to make up in formers anyway. I wanted to get this little former in here because this'll make a rigid backdrop when I actually put the canopy on. And now I can adjust this dimension up and down that I don't have. I want to have a nice straight transition there, just like the scale plane. Wonder why I'm not just making scale models and be done with it. But this little former, without this former, this is a little on the flimsy side. I took a marker pen and just carefully traced around the outline of this, because what I'm going to do is carve a little ditch in here that this can drop into, and I want it to be real careful that from the top that this wasn't puckered out or puckered in, or whether it was high or low. I want this to have as if it came out of one piece. You're getting the top of this even. This is the difficult part, is getting one smooth contour from the front right to the back. I'll look at it from a lot of different angles until I get... Use little pieces of masking tape to make sure I have these two lines parallel. I don't start wandering off one way or another. Now I just try to line up the edge of the tape, go about 1/4 of an inch, cut on both sides, and then pull that piece out. In effect, that's making me a little ditch. I don't want to go too deep because I know this is only an 1/8 inch shell. Go another 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch or so. Cut it sideways. And go right around that whole perimeter. And then we'll do a little test fit. Make that little ditch. That trench just roughed out. I also need to relieve this, the thickness of the canopy, or else the canopy is going to stick up. And this is true like even on a Nobler or on any ship that has this kind of a canopy. You don't want to have a step there. You'd like it to be, I'd like it to be as smooth as possible. And I need to have this come straight down and go right into the ditch, so there's a little bit of a corner in there. Now what I'll do here to clean out this ditch is fold back some 220 sandpaper, some sticky back paper, and make a little tool, or you can even use 64th plywood with a piece of the sticky back paper on it. And I just want to see how much I've got to, ooh. It's the thickness. Oh, that's, okay, getting close. Now I just, for lack of a better tool, just fold up the sandpaper and drag it through the ditch, and it cleans it right up. All the little knife marks. Then I need to test fit and see if the canopy is going to fit right in there. See, right here is where it's a problem too. You want it to come flat down and then right into the ditch. So right in there, I don't want to have a high spot. And this is basically the way I put all my canopies on for, well, I don't know. I'm too old to remember. A long time. Haven't had any problem with them cracking or leaking or peeling, or, and some of them actually have been pretty cool. The final fitting on this, that notch just about matches the glass part of the canopy. It kind of drops right in. And now the next step on this is going to be to lay out what will be the removable box that I can take in and out and put my details in. But this was, at least while I was planning this plane. I thought this was going to be such a doable thing, but I'm not sure now exactly how I want to do it. Again, have to kind of invent it as I go along here. What I want to do is I put the 1/8 inch tape around the edge to make the equivalent of a box. I don't even have to ask if this pen is going to write. Forget it. That's good enough. So I want to cut this piece out. This is going to be my pattern for making a box. I want to, in essence, make a little box. Now I'm limited here because, as in some planes, now if the cockpit were further forward or further back, it would simplify things a tremendous amount. Because what I have to take into account here is the throw of the horn. So I need to go measure the total throw of the horn, add about 1/8 of an inch for clearance, and then that'll give me the depth that I can make this little box. And the idea is I can take this little box out, put it in a carbon fuselage, or put it in my next plane. It won't go into the dumpster when we're done. Again, I thought this was a cute idea, and the reason it's possible is because on a tune pipe plane you can get in through the bottom. Now, even if it were not take apart and the cockpit were further back, I'd be able to access it, reach in with a screwdriver and take it out. So I don't know if this has any real future, but at least we'll give it a try. It's just one more thing that we need to try things, and if you try 10, 15, 20 things and only 10 of them work, it's no problem. It's, you know, every one doesn't have to work. Now obviously this is a good spot to have a nice new XL blade, so I get a nice clean cut here. Obviously a good idea is to save this little piece, because when we go to make another fuselage or the carbon fuselage, we need to have, or it would be handy to have, a pattern to just trace out our opening, because that box that fits in this fuselage would, if we can be, ultimately assuming we're going to be able to do this, take it out, plug it into another one, and put the two little 256 screws in, or some kind of attachment. Even Velcro may be appropriate here. And again, I want to have a piece like this, a pattern. When Elliot draws the plans, I want as many of these things on as possible. I don't want to have anything left to the imagination. Now I want to square up the walls here before I actually start making up this little box. And again, I have to take into careful account that height, the height of the horn. I'd hate to make this whole thing up and you put it in and you can't move the controls. We don't need this anymore. Again, I always like to use tape to get rough ideas of where things are going to line up. Okay. Measured this off, and I know I can make the box this depth, because this is where I'll have the end of my clearance for the horn. And again, this would vary by, if the cockpit were back here or further forward, you would not have to really take this into account. Now, another thing that this buys us, one of the little things I've always done with my planes, is put little seal a cockpit and then put a little coffee filter in it so that the dust wouldn't get in. In this case, if I can take this out, God, I can get up in here with a Q-tip or a rag or something, clean inside, and you know how aggravating that is. You know, just before appearance, you can take the cockpit out, clean all the thing, whatever you have to do, boing, put it back. Or if the pilot, if you had a pilot, I'm not going to have a pilot in this plane, but if you had a pilot with his head moving or his glasses falling off, this is really a, well, I don't want to predict, but it seems like it's something that, I wonder why nobody else, probably 10 other people thought of this, only I'm going to steal their idea. Anyway, I thought it was original anyway. Now, I've got to lay out this box, that's the next thing. 16th balsa. I'm going to mark off and cut up some wood exactly the height that I know will give me clearance, and then I just need to lay out the little box. I know I can't have anything longer than that height. First little piece I laid out, it becomes the back of the box and a little back rest for the seat. Now I just need the length. They're going to have a little bit of curve in them, and a squared off piece for the dashboard. Okay, once I have this, then I can obviously set the height. Now remember, this has to come in through the bottom, so I can't have anything hanging out here. Everything has to have either a zero draft angle or even a little bit negative draft angle would be okay. So I just need to get the length, put the other side on. Okay, now I just need to lay out the front piece. Now, I wasn't making this box up. I just realized, and it's in the article, the 1967 article, or 69, whenever it was printed, the way this cockpit and this plane was made. Of course, you didn't have to take into account the bell crank here, but I made a little box, and this is the way Harold Price basically showed me how to do it. Make a little box, put all the details in a box, and glue the box in. So even if you were making a canopy that you were going to glue in, this is kind of an easy way to do it. I got the little box done, and it's just reminded me little tricks that you may be able to use on your canopy job. We're trying to do what I call a quick and dirty canopy, not a Seafire 2000 little detail canopies. I'd like this to be an air racer. Does not have a real complex, it's kind of a simple cockpit, and I want to try to, even though it's not scale, I want to simulate that. And by the way, the Strega tapes have an excellent bubble canopy presentation on them. Now, old Ken, he had the luxury of having a pilot, and I just thought of one other thing you could do would be a spin-off on this. If you were making a take-apart plane, you could make a removable pilot. Well, how easy would that be? Just let the seat come out the bottom. Anyway, just some thoughts. All of Harold Price's planes were made with a little box, all the details, a pilot, everything, and then just drop the box right into the top block. Looking at Al Rabe's cockpit, how easy would that be? These planes all had removable wings. That'd be a snap to do. Certainly meets the criteria for the height. I need to just dress this off a little bit with a piece of sandpaper because I want it to be a relatively tight fit. I don't want it to be vibrating around in there. In fact, I see I can sand a little bit off the front. But what I did, I squared these edges off so that it's a little bit easier to make a part and cut that hole and get it exact also. It's a coffin for a mouse or something, yeah. Little mouse coffin, that's cute. Okay, so now I know this is basically where this is going to sit. I want to get the floor in cross grain. Now the next thing I have to do is figure out how I'm going to hold this in position. I don't want to do any of the final fits until I find out or see how I want to hold this in position. So the next thing I have to do is invent that. I took some 1/8" light ply, some 256 blind nuts, and laminated them in, and I just put a little bit of chain lube on the front of the bolt to try to make sure I don't have, when I put this in place, I don't want to have some CA get into the threads. Okay, everything is okay. Now what I'm going to try to do is make two little tabs out of this. Made a piece of 3/8 wood because I want this to be what I call self-aligning. If I put the tabs in the plane and then try to drill a ball, man, the thing I want to do is attach the pieces to the actual little box and have these set in place and then just drop it in so that the piece itself lines up the blind nuts. And that's really the easiest way I can think of to do this. Need to make two little tabs on here that'll set the height. I left extra material, so if I make it too large, once I put the tabs on there, then I can just slide this up and tack glue that in place, take this out, and this will be in perfect position. So I'm using this as a tool to align these little tabs. Mouse coffin. These little fits up, this is real important to use a precision drill so that it's a nice tight fit. Otherwise, when you lose all the self-alignment features of this. Just bolted the little piece. And notice I left plenty of extra material. I can cut this out with the saw, and I'll have the mount and the support piece all in one shot, and they'll be like a mirror image. Now I can mount the pieces right to this and then set this in and set the height from these tabs. I'm using this as an alignment tool. Same way as if you put the hole in the cowling and then you put the mount in the plane. it's kind of self-aligning. This is the easiest way I know of to do this kind of a job. This piece, as I want to raise this piece, this then becomes my height gauge, and I'll leave it a little bit oversized to begin with, and then I can see roughly how high this is going to sit up. I can just keep trimming and sanding until it's equal all around. And then once I tack this in position and loosen the screws, take this out, these two little plugs will stay right in position and should be relatively well aligned. You can see this is a little low in the back, so all I need to do is sand that back piece just a little bit. And I'll have this edge, and I can actually rotate it side to side. All I can say is the one thing I really didn't want to have happen is have some of that glue work its way down into the part of this I don't want it to be in, and it would glue this in place. Well, a little extra oil on the screws always helps in that case. Okay, now we have what we did in effect was use the box to line up and get a real good alignment on our little mounts. Now we have the right height. Now I can paint this area with some thick CA, get this sealed, harden it up a little bit, and now we could work on, one of the things I think I'll do is try to reinforce these mounts. Look a little tentative. Try to figure a way of reinforcing them a little bit. I wanted the grain going front to back. Now I'm going to trim this off and then just make myself a slot for the screw. After I use the Dremel to just make that a little bit stronger. I didn't want that to be so weak. I also broke this back piece off. My poor mouse is going to fall out of the coffin. I think the first thing I'm going to do is get a piece of 64th plywood in here so that this isn't so flimsy. I just see that's going to be breaking every time I touch it. Now before I do that back piece, I set tape up so I can set a clearance around the whole perimeter here. Instead of having an uneven line, now I can just take the piece out using a file, nail file, get that exactly even so it'll have a nice look. It won't have an unfinished look when we put it all together. It really did work out. See, the clearance is not equal, and I don't like that. So I want to... But the bolt hold down, that's just about perfect there. Now with that tape you can see just how much that little lip I need. I just dress that right off. And by having the tape as an edge, it should allow me then, of course, as soon as I get the edge that I want, I'll harden it up with thin CA. Now I have relatively even clearance around the whole part that I wanted. I lined the edges with 64th plywood. That'll give us a little edge to work with, and they're real nice and straight. Made the back piece so this way I have something to work with here. And I want to lay out the front piece. Now, normally I would really like to get an angle in that. Well, it's going to be a little difficult because I have to take into account that I have to be able to push this up into position. Now by making all the parts out of 64th plywood, I can use up all the scraps, and really, when you're all done, it doesn't weigh a whole lot. Now that's just what's going to ultimately be the outline of the dashboard when we make it. Now at least we have a solid box. We know it mounts, and we know it has all the edges on it. The way we'd, well, really like to have some, that it's solid. I don't want to have it that it... Now, the easiest way to put those in is with a little grindstone I found. I want to harden up the edges with thin CA and then dress them off with a little dowel with some sandpaper on it. And that'll be one more step out of the way. And it's the little details like this where we're going to be doing these holes. Anytime you want to put a hole, it's hard to drill a hole like this, but it's real easy with a little grindstone on the end of a Dremel tool. It's actually that you're burning it in, you're not drilling it in.
He felt it wasn't a forward pass.
Just want to check all my fits before I go on to the next step.
The play on the kickoff, what is it called?
Things I wanted to do is put the little hand, when you climb into some airplanes, look, I can't even get it on the camera. These little handles. Now, what I'm going to do is put a piece on the back too, and then I can seal all the edges with thin CA.
Another half to be played before wild card weekend is.
Now, little by little, it's starting to take shape. Those little grab irons add a little detail to it. But we're at the end of this day, and the next thing we're going to need to do is, make the seat, the dashboard, all the little details. So we're going to pack it in for today. I had a couple minutes here before I have to go to work. I wanted to put some detailing, just basically putting some lightning holes, simulating some of the aircraft lightning holes that would normally be in a plane like this. Okay, the next little thing I want to do is lay up the seat. I'm going to go get some, I don't know, I want to have a little curve in it. I'm trying to picture what it would look like. Each time I do this, of course, I have to scale it, and because we can't really make it scale, I'm going to have the bottom of the seat rest right on what amounts to be the floor of this little piece. Now, one of the good sources, and I got these last year, this is from my friend Bob English. He did a redraw. I think this is the thing that was in Pampa, too. But look how nicely he's drawn out the scale cockpit, give you some idea of, even for details, say if you're doing an SV11 or something, these are nice details. And some nice instrument layouts, different little things. And then, of course, this is just to give you ideas. This would be for this scale of plane, but since we're not doing a scale model, I don't think it's real critical. But certainly we can use any little ideas for details like this. And right now we want to do the seat, so I want to get a little idea. I know the seat is like a sheet metal curved on the bottom. I always try to do is save all my instruments and detailing and all the little doodads that go into cockpits in an envelope. And of course this is handy, you loan it out to people and they don't return it. Sometimes. Now I have a piece of 64th plywood that already is pre-curved, but I guess if you didn't have this, you could just wet it and wrap it around something and let it dry overnight. It's got a little bit of a bend in it. Now the idea of this holds this in position. That's the back of the seat, and then I can pretty much see this is pretty flexible still. I can get the curve so that the bottom of the seat has a curve and the back, and I can get that joint nice and even. It oversized, now I can trim it in this dimension and clean it all up, clean the extra glue off, get a good glue joint on the back. Sometimes working with 64th plywood, it's just easier to use grinding tips than sanding tips. You just get a little bit nicer finish. I want to make sure this is going to at least somehow fit in there. Okay, next thing I want to put the side little reinforcements, and I'm stealing a lot of this right off of Bob English's plans. They're kind of handy. Having that little curve in the bottom of the seat makes it a little bit, but that plywood wants to go back to the way it was. But even if it did, what I do is just put a little ammonia on it and wrap it back on that mold. I used a little, a roll of sandpaper for the mold, and I could get any curve in there I want then. Now just roughly roughing this out with pieces of scrap. Again, just use up all the scraps you have. Doesn't work out, dump it. And I try to put the little curves in there with a Dremel tool, and then sand, get it smoothed out as much as I can. Now most of these little details I've just been doing with a pointy-ended Dremel tool. The plywood I can tell you a lot of this is from making doll houses. The plywood allows you to get nice, sharp, crisp edges. If you were doing this with balsa wood, everything would be... I'll tell you a great dollhouse story real quick. Joe Adamusco was by my house and he saw this dollhouse that took me a long time to make for my wife. Very long time. And so he wanted to make one for his niece, and he said, "How many hours does it take to make one?" I said, "Oh, Joe, geez, do it in a weekend." So he went out and bought the kit and everything. It took him over 200 hours to make it. He was cursing me out for the whole year because he had already promised his niece he was going to make it for her. Anyway, you get good experience. Whoop, as he steps on it. A little sandpaper, a little piece of wire with the sticky sandpaper. Even out the whole edges. Every once in a while I want to make sure when I put this in here that I'm not building it at a scale. This to a little pedestal just temporarily. A couple of tacks of glue because I want to paint it next. This way the paint can be drying while I'm making up one of the other parts. From the previous year I have a touch-up kit with all little touch-up paints for the other models. But one of the things this allows me to do is custom mix some cockpit paint. Mix a little bit of blue and yellow, in this case some light blue and yellow. I want to get a couple of shades of the zinc chromate. This is the kind of thing you kind of do by eye, or you can get a photograph of a plane. Almost every airplane has some area on it that has zinc chromate. Now if you had just a little bit of talcum powder, what you find out is when it dries, it'll dry with a flat, very realistic look. And this you have to kind of do a little test. The reason we're doing this is we'll do a test on the seat. And that should be just about right. Put even just a couple of drops of retarder in there, it'll tend to dry. Now this is going to dry relatively flat, but I just want to see, I'm candling here, see the light going across it, for any big globs or brush strokes, anything that's going to show in the final part. And if it dries too shiny, I'll put a little more talc in that mix, and then obviously just put another coat on. Now we did this before with the Spitfire with these enamel flat dry colors, but again somebody borrowed them, didn't give them back. We won't mention any names. Now I can paint all the areas here except up into the ditch. I don't want to get any paint in the ditch. That ultimately I want the epoxy to stick in there. I don't want to have a bunch of paint in there if possible. Now I'm going to try it. One of the things that I like to do with zinc chromate is make it even more three-dimensional, is make things that border each other one shade lighter or darker. So I'm going to take some of the zinc chromate and just add a little bit of black to it, darken it up just a little bit, so that the little piece that fits in here will have an accent against the seat. And while this is drying, we can work on other parts. This is one of the parts of modeling that I really get a kick out of. I really do enjoy making a nice presentation in the cockpit area. I took the time to mix 3 different colors of zinc chromate because I want to do a lot of 3D'ing on this. And I'll start with this little piece here just to see once it dries, because the colors do change once they dry. And when you set them next to each other, what happens if you have a darker and a lighter color, it tends to look more three-dimensional than it really is. It's an old model railroading. I laid out the dashboard just to see if this is going to be appropriate in 64th plywood, laminated right to some light ply, because I want to drill holes in here for the instruments. Just heard, while we were off camera, I heard from Bob Brookins that the new Miss Ashley Red is in the pipeline, so I'll be hoping to get that in the next couple of days. Do a little test on it, and it will hopefully be a Brodak color along with the candy apple colors. Anyway, what I have is from that lamination, I've drilled some holes and just glued on with CA a piece of 1200 sandpaper, and that gives me a nice anti-glare look. Now I need to clean these holes up, and the way I usually wind up doing that is with a little bit of a grindstone. Let me just see if I can. Like I said, I'm going to take a break and answer the phone. What that does, it cleans the edges up just a bit. The thing is, I take a Sharpie marker. You believe this telephone? Anyway, and just get from both sides of this. Got to answer the phone. And all that does is give a nice edge to round. Just again, it's a real quick way. The Sharpie marker is even waterproof, but it just blackens in the edge of the wood. And for cockpit detailing, it leaves kind of a dull finish, which is a little more prototypical than if you use black paint, black dope, or whatever. Making up the back piece here, just marked where the holes would be. Now I need to cut out the instruments, of course, and just glue those in place in the 5 circles, or however prototypical you want to make it. What I like to do is use the tip of a pin to just lay an instrument in place. Put a very tiny drop of CA there. I got to make sure all of these line up. Piece of a canopy that I didn't use, but any kind of thin plastic will be fine for this. I want to make the glass for the instruments. Now I just laminated a sheet of that plastic. See, I like to see the glass of the instruments reflecting in the sun. Just laminated a piece of that right in between, sandwiched, and then another piece of wood. Now I need to dress off this whole outside edge, but that basically will then comprise the base of the dashboard before we detail it. I like the glass. The glass is a real important part to me. The thing I want to lay out is this little hood, the little top piece that overlaps. I want to get an angle in it too, just a slight angle forward on this. Now I just need to trim the shape on it. Okay, trimmed out that little hood as the next step. Rough idea how that looks when it's in place. Now I'll put this aside to dry while we work on some of the other details. It's drying. I want to make up some what I call switches. What I do, I take ordinary straight pins, cut the end off, and obviously this is what T-pins, I guess they are. Take the end and just smash it with a hammer till it looks like a spoon. Now while it's smashed like that, now I gotta find these little tiny washers. I don't even know what size these are. They're in my junk bin. Can't even pick them up. I just take a drop of CA. See if I can get this on a close-up lens. I'm not sure I can. Just one drop of CA on that is the next step. Now if you put it on a little angle, of course it looks like the switch is down. If you reverse it, it looks like the switch is up. I'll make up some of these for the dashboard. I always try to make a few extra just in case I look and I say, it doesn't look right, or one is bigger than the other. They don't tend to all come out symmetrical on the first shot. Any real Warbird interior is going to have some toggle switches. Almost every one I've ever seen does. And so whether they're on the side or whether they're on the dashboard, we just want to have a bunch of them made up. They're real simple. Take a minute or two to make each one up. Now every time I can make up some little detail like this, I just feel like each detail complements the next one. But when you come up with having a few switches on a dashboard, you want to look around and have all of the other little things, because little by little, the nicer you make it, the more you get in the mood to have something really special, and I don't know, I've always liked looking in the cockpit of a plane, any model, scale, stunt, and seeing some pretty nice little detail work. Now I just get a piece of scrap wood, line these all up, and now the trick to making them look realistic is to mix up some 5-minute epoxy with black dye in it. That leaves a nice, like a plastic look, like the look of a real toggle switch. Real easy to do, only takes a minute or two to do. Now black dye and 5-minute epoxy mixes up, and when it dries, especially if it's warm in your shop condition, it's going to dry just like the finish of plastic. But I remember looking at, just as an example, Keith Trossel's MB5 that had all these nice little scale switches, and Charlie Chambers' Black Widow. I mean, I just think of some of these really pro planes. Just absolutely beautiful. And you see these little details, and sometimes you wonder, well, how the heck did he do that? Again, the deal is, it's amazing to me when that dries, if you don't know how that's done. That's one of those great, I don't know. Well, how did he do that tricks? And it doesn't take a long time to make up a whole bunch of these. I don't know how many we have here. But we'll figure it out. Now, if we were making a scale model, we'd need to have the exact number that are on the dashboard of the scale model, but not so. And you can basically just, that's all there is to it. Well, we'll put those aside to dry, but when they're done, they really do have to look a little toggle switches. And you can always paint one red or something, so if you want it to look like it's an emergency switch or something. Good little tip. I think that's on all the last 4 or 5 the Spitfire, Seafire videos. The next thing I want to make is, while that's drying, make up the trim wheel. You can make that up out of balsa wood. Just carve it up. Figure out what scale. I guess that's the scale right there. So then I can take a piece of just ordinary scrap. I think light ply would be the easiest, because I want to put grooves. What I want to do is I want to put little teeth in it to simulate those little wheels. This will give me the right size. Okay, I just need to take, it's the easiest to do with a parting wheel, I think. As I said, this wheel would have these little teeth. Almost looks like a little gear. Yeah, it's ready to paint. I took a little piece of light ply and just ran a parting wheel through it for a groove to try to simulate a throttle with a map pin. Again, I'm trying to capture the angle. It comes off on an angle here. Up the last few minutes of this session, we're almost at the end, with some of the black epoxy with dye in it, I made up what'll be the boot for the joystick. I already have the hole drilled. I just thought some of this stuff is kind of self-explanatory, but the black epoxy leaves that nice finish that, unlike the dope finish where you would need several coats and clear and everything to get that shine. That'll be our boot, and I just carved this. Actually, this is the end of a paintbrush handle and a Dremel tool. The other little piece is the stick I made out of aluminum tubing with a piece of brass, and then try to cut the finger grips in it, similar to, but not, certainly not totally scale. This should give the look of the rubber grip, which would be relatively scale. I painted up all the little details, and what's nice is if they dry overnight, tomorrow I can handle them very easily. A lot of this stuff, and you can kind of, obviously, once you get a couple of ideas, you can kind of improvise and come up with some ideas of your own. And it really is a shame when you see a really nice stunt ship, and I've had many of them, and you look and the canopy detail is lacking or non-existent. I always think that's such an important part. Well, we got all the little pieces drying here. I guess we'll be here. Let's see if the seat came out. Get back to working on this tomorrow. All the little switches and things drying down here. Dashboards, little boxes. I hope this has given, just give you some ideas of some of the things that you may want to consider doing on one of your models. It's starting to look like a baby crib. Oh man. I'm going to put the switches in tomorrow. Everything seems to be drying up. A little trim wheel. And that little seat, I like the way the seat came out. Anyway, it's about all the fun I can stand. Even I need time to eat and sleep. Now this morning I put up my new bird feeder. It isn't even daylight out. I got a bunch of finches out there. One thing I like about the finches, they always come in pairs. Look at these suckers eating. Anyway, I'm going to have my coffee, get down and try to do some more work on that cockpit. I love watching these birds in the morning. It's also the end of the Christmas season, and we hope it's been a good one for you and your family and friends. And wow, we've just had the best Christmas ever. I hate to take the tree down, but hey, life goes on. Cockpits go on. Alright, all my little parts should be dry. All the little stuff I worked on last night. Oh God, unbelievable. Once the paint dries, you get that nice flat finish. It really starts to look nice, and maybe we'll get some more, I don't know, we got some more details. We got switches, we got sticks, we got the boot for the stick. That's dry. The little chair is drying up. Maybe before I start a day, I like to look at everything. Everything's starting to shape up little by little. I think we're going to look at the drawings a little bit and get back to working on this. Just pressed in through the little holes that I pre-drilled. You don't want to try pressing through all this wood. And I'll just clip these off with my little wire snips. And it looks like I need to get a little drop of black epoxy down in here. There's a little spot that didn't take. Next time I mix black epoxy, I'll just fill it in with a toothpick. Look at this, they stick right in your finger. Anyway, we want to clean this up and Dremel all the excess off the back of this part. I'm going to start assembling this. Now this is some 80 grit wet and dry paper, which makes for a nice flooring, and it has a nice texture, and the sunlight kind of sparkles a little bit. But that makes a good flooring. You can see how that looks, I guess, kind of prototypical. Not like we're having a scale contest here or anything, but that I've always used wet and dry paper for a floor. Now that I know that fits, I can glue that in with just a nice layer of thick CA and let it kick off. Now again, the thicker grades of wet and dry make for a more defined floor. You don't want to use the same one that the dashboard is done. I'd like to have a little, anytime you can use another texture, this adds a little interest to it. And since we're going to actually glue parts to this, It's starting to look like a cockpit. Something looked like something, I don't know what. Alright, the next step was I glued in the seat permanently, making sure I got a little dab of glue right up there so this doesn't vibrate. Now I want to fit, the next thing is to fit the dashboard in. All the switches have been installed. Starting to shape up. See, now here's where the two different colors of green kind of interact. Give it a three-dimensional look. Now it's really starting to come together. I got this glued in, the little trim wheel. Next thing I want to work on is the little throttle for this side. I think this is going to be a real nice little piece. Now, the nice thing is, next time I build a model and I want to use this cockpit, I can just, I don't have to go through this whole ordeal again. Yeah, I think this is going to work. It's very simple, very basic. It's going to serve the purpose very well. And I got the little stick ready too. I'm trying to figure out how high I want to have this, but of course I can just plug it into the boot any thickness I want. I made this little part up, the little throttle quadrant. Now I need to make the little arm up. I was going to use a map pin, but it just didn't look realistic enough for me, so I'm going to make a what looks a little more like what's on the plans. What I do is lay out the stick before I put the throttle in, drill a hole through here, because I want to get a good glue joint on this, of course. There's a little boot. Now I know how much I have to trim off my, what used to be a paintbrush. End of a paintbrush here. Okay, we got the little joystick in there. We've got the glue joint on the bottom. Now I just need to trim it off. And because it's real aluminum, it has the exact, see the shine of the light on it, that'll reflect nice in sunlight. I painted the side of the trim wheel with flat black, just so it contrasted with the switch edges. And I need to make up that throttle piece now. Anyway, it's coming out kind of nice. A lot of fun making this stuff. What always used to bother me the worst is I'd make something like this knowing that once I made it, it was sealed in there. And by the way, if you seal it in a cockpit and it's totally sealed, you ought to leave a little pinhole and put a piece of coffee filter by it. I've said that before because what happens, you've seen planes where the canopy fogs up and you take it out in a, oh man, now you can't get in there. Or if, say, this wheel becomes loose, you're done. That thing's jumping around and bouncing around like a jumping bean in there. But with this system, you just take two screws out, take it out, fix it, put it back, or in this case we could add a pilot or a, well, something anyway. Just nice. Now can you imagine working on this with the wing here and the tail here and it's upside down and you're banging into it? So much more convenient. Even if this were not going to be a replaceable piece, right now to just sink that into a fuselage, I don't know, it just seems like a good way to do it. One of many good ways to do it, that's for sure. Now I just need to make the little forward and back lever for this. I don't know, every time you get a detail now, it's really starting to shape up. Again, the throttle has like a handle look. I'm not going to try to make a carbon copy of it, but that's very similar to what it looks like. But with an ordinary pin, and what I want to do is just clip one end off, one of these map pins. I just wasn't happy with the way that looked. I really can't say why. But I guess because one of the things you see is a lot of planes with, you know, for lack of a better word, a cockpit full of map heads. We wanted something a little different, so we'll start by having an L bend, and then I need to create a little lever on this side. I think I can do that with aluminum tubing. Again, difficult to photograph on a macro lens like this. If I'm going to be able to show this, if this is clear, is I have a little notch to make this convincing looking, I need that notch. Otherwise, what would happen is it sits out like this, doesn't look convincing. With that little notch, it now looks a lot more like a little throttle quadrant would look. Now obviously what I'll do is get a little bit of CA, glue that in all the way, and then trim this off. Okay, I always find it more convincing when I can fill this little gap here and make this 90 degrees. Now I just need to trim this off. And because it's aluminum, it tends to look very realistic. If you paint it silver or paint it gray or something, nothing looks as realistic as real aluminum. Now, a little 1200 sandpaper just gives it that look of real aluminum. Of course, it is real aluminum. Now what I want to do is get something and blacken inside the crack, just so it has the look of that the throttle quadrant was moving back and forth. Give it a little detail. It would be a shame to go through this video and not thank Bob English again, for he sent me these plans a couple of years ago, I think. And it was nice to see his picture on the cover of and well featured in Stunt News. Now this is right from the back cover of Stunt News, and I remember Bob sending me these pictures, and I was just flipping out. And he obviously this is a truly scale effort. Now mine is not. It's made to be quick and simple and dirty and replaceable. But I really have to take my hat off to you. That is one of, and possibly the nicest cockpit I've ever seen. If you just happen to have that Stunt News, just take a real quick look at some of the details on this plane. It's really pretty special stuff. Anyway, we want to see how this is going to fit in the fuselage now, and because obviously one of the criteria here, we have to be able to take this in and out. Look at all the little, just look at the ink lines. So some of the other details on here, all the little Zeus fittings and stuff. I really am impressed. That's a beautiful model. And even the exhaust stain, Al had that on some of his planes. Beautiful. Now let's just get some idea how this looks when it's in place, and obviously if we need to do any touch-up, modification, whatever. Now the only thing I can see that I need to work on is I need to blacken in the balsa wood along the edges, so that when you look through the lightning holes you don't see balsa wood, you see kind of a shadowy black. Anyway, I'd say that's about as, well. And just the fact that I don't have to do this again for the next model, or if I choose to use this in the carbon body, or if, whatever the combination of results, I have choices now. And I guess all that's left here is gluing up the plastic part of it and the things that go along with it. I blackened that area in so that when you look through, basically so when you look through and you see the little holes, in fact I got to do a little more, I ought to do all the way down. You don't see the color of the balsa wood. Just a Sharpie marker. It's a nice thing, it adds no weight. Really needed to go all the way to the end so that when I flipped it over, you didn't look through the little pilot holes and see the color of balsa wood. Now, had I thought this through a little better, I would have painted the inside of this shell, maybe back to here, the inside of it with a black Sharpie marker too, but I don't think that's going to stand out as much as the side pieces. Again, just little details. You know, and the reality is nobody's really going to see these except me, but the problem is I see them. And I really, really do like to strive for the best possible, you know, whatever, the best of everything. Now, I'm always careful when I'm done. Have a little touch-up paint left over. In this case, I can use this on other ships. Mark what it is so I know it's going to dry flat. Put this aside so, for instance, if we need to match this at some future time, I don't spend my whole day mixing paint. Just got to tell you, today I finished reading this book. This is absolutely, if you don't read any other book about Reno air races, boy, this book tells it all. And there are so many fun things in this. Things that I didn't even know about Strega and Dago and the Red Baron and everything. Just a wonderful book, really informative. I want to thank Dennis Toth for loaning this to me. I did the Red Baron. I went and did all my research and got pictures and everything, but I never knew the inside story. And I just want to give you one example. I want to read one paragraph here and think about this for 1 second. Steve Hinton is the pilot of the Red Baron. Right after the Red Baron crashed. This is the way the author writes this book. It's really well written. And I'm a writer. I know I'm fussy about what I don't read much, but when I read something, I really have to like it. Talking about Steve Hinton. Hinton was a tough kid who possessed the rude good health of youth. In 2 days, he was sitting up cracking jokes with his friends. This is after the accident. In a month, he was back home. In a short while, he was flying. In due time, he was even racing again. But it would never be the same. Racing had nearly killed him, and in the years to come, he would see it kill his friends. That is such a moving piece. From this book, I have to tell you, I'm just absolutely in love with this book. Fly low, fly fast, and it really has some intimate stuff about Tiger DeStefani and some of the pain and anguish of the crash at a pond racer, Tsunami, Miss Ashley, they're all in here. Great book. His mail. These are from Paul Winter. He's building a Tsunami. Now, I've been on Paul's case about not inventing things, and rightfully so. I just want to go right through these pictures real quick. There's quite a few of them. John Benzig sighting down a wing in Paul's workshop here and probably saying something like, Paul, it's as crooked as a pretzel. Paul's wingtips. In the background here you can see his previous Tsunami. Now, the reason I'm showing these pictures now is he's going to do this up in the silver paint job, not the red paint job that both Ken Clapson, myself, and several other people have done. He's got one, it looks like he's got one of those modern windy bell cranks in here. I guess we'll find out. He modified the tail. See, I know I got to spank him for this. I know he's going to do something crazy. You give him enough time and he finds something, some crazy way to invent something. Anyway, Paul, we really love you, but the invention's got to go. Now, the original model was 82 ounces, and now this one is slated to be in the low 60s, so I have to wonder, what did he do wrong? Anyway, Paul, I appreciate all these pictures. And we're all looking forward to seeing exactly how much this thing weighs. Number one, if all of this worked, Paul, by the way, has the whole set of Tsunami videos, so if he missed one part of this, if he missed even one little part, we're really going to jump all over him. Anyway, here's some other pictures here that he sent. They have a model exhibit, and he entered one of his models in this competition. I'm not going to say on camera how he wound up. Anyway, there's his original Tsunami. I can't wait to hear from Ken Clapson too. He's writing a nice article for Stunt News. Hopefully tell about the adventure of his involvement with Tsunami. It's funny, we all have these involvements with models. Look, he did a nice job on the gear blocks here. By the way, Paul, we do appreciate the pictures. Now, I'm guessing, see, Paul doesn't send an exact caption for each picture. I'm assuming that's how he held, with tape, that's how he held the sheeting down. Not a good idea. It puts a bow in a wing. Masking tape. Paul, here's the deal. Lay a 1-inch block on top here and then go over the block if that's how you want to do it. And since Paul is watching all these videos, along with all our friends in England now, built on the rod method. Again, the double gear blocks. He's numbered the hatch. And it looks like he's got one of those modern windy bell cranks in there. By the way, Bob Pitkin is going to be selling those with wrapped ends for anybody who has feelings about preferring wrapped ends rather than crimps. Here's his wing jig. Looks like he's got a very similar wing jig to what we have. Anyway, I enjoy seeing how the planes come together. Not crazy when I saw how that tail was made. I guess we'll find out. See what it weighs. Most of it, we'll see if it's straight. We're going to be doing the tail very soon. We're going to be using my my patented wrapped leading edge, hollow leading edge method. Patented, yeah, right. Anyway, now I see when he made these ribs, he didn't hollow out. See, I do all the hollowing before I put them on. That's what's nice about the videos. See, he's got, again, when I see him or speak to him, I'm going to ask him about that. It's certainly a lot easier to hollow them out ahead of time. Anyway, Paul Winter, and Paul, we appreciate you sharing this with us. And Paul, his model that really did get the winning award. He doesn't say what the award is. I don't know, maybe they give you a piece of paper in England, give you a bagel or something. Anyway, Paul, appreciate it a whole lot. Back to work. Now, by doing the cockpit the way we did, we have a lot of choices. And one of the choices I have that I didn't really think about until I saw this, and I looked at it and I said, one of the choices I have on the carbon fuselage that I'm making, a matching carbon fuselage, is to have no cockpit detail at all. Carve the canopy and the cockpit from one piece and then just paint the canopy on the way some of these models were made. There's certainly nothing wrong with that, but it still gives me the choice of doing it. Now, I weighed that cockpit up. It weighs 9.5 grams. So in effect, I can make the model that much lighter, even if I make a cockpit, just by taking that out at the team trials or, you know, any contest where we're not worried about appearance points. And the way things go sometimes, they don't even look at the cockpit. They put the planes with painted cockpits right in the front row anyway, so it doesn't even matter, including mine. Really is something about a sexy cockpit, and it's one of the focal points of a plane. Just something that I absolutely think is, if possible, I'd like to include on as many of my models as possible. A lot of these models here, they were concourse winners without a cockpit, just painting on the balsa wood, so it really does give you a lot of choices. When you think about the Strega cockpit, the Red Baron cockpit, I don't know, that focal point of the plane is something special. Now here we are, just as we end this video, up in the Spitfire bedroom. We've gotten some more tchotchkes, some more books. We're in the middle of making a bookshelf. Just seems like there's no end to the things we're doing in this room. I just get out of just keep thinking about how, wonder how many other people have a Spitfire bedroom. Anyway, Joe Adamusco really enjoyed it when he was here. And the cockpit detail on these models, I just think that just becomes one very, very enjoyable part of my modeling, doing the cockpits. And one enjoyable thing is having a Spitfire bedroom just sitting here. Oh, I love this. I just come up here, and I know Elliot likes staying up here. I know whoever my next house guest is, they're going to love staying in the Spitfire bedroom. This really was a lot of fun. Really have had a good time. And we have the memorabilia. We still have more stuff to put up here. I still can't believe we have more stuff to work on. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed the video and gotten some good ideas, things that you can do for your modeling life or your career, whatever career. I don't know if you call this a career. I just come up here at night. When I take the garbage out, I look outside, I turn the light on, I look up here and I see these models and I just think, wow, kinda cool. Anyway, again, I hope you've gotten some really good ideas, something that'll just be a lot of fun, just make the world of modeling a lot more fun than it would be without the videos. Now look, as I'm looking at this picture, you can see even the real plane fog. I guess they don't have a defroster in this. fogged up. And that's what happens if you do a cockpit and seal it. It almost guarantees you'll get that fog. Boy, that makes you crazy. And then on a plane that isn't a take-apart plane, you can't get in there and conveniently put that coffee filter in either. Just something to think about. Alright, roll number 38. To Paul for sharing the pictures. Paul, you're okay. I don't care what John Benzig says about you. And listen, Paul, start leaving waitresses a tip. This is a clue. A clue. Waitresses, especially young waitresses that would put up with that face, give them a big tip. And that tsunami better not be too heavy either. So that wasn't that hard to build now. Come on, was it? Please share the videos with all your friends, all your fellow modeling friends. Now this last little step, and of course it's one of the most important ones, is to glue the simulated glass in place. We already have the ditch, I already have the piece cut. I want to do a final fitting on it, and we'll be ready to finalize this cockpit. Last fittings I did, from looking at the drawings and from looking at the photos, I bought a couple more these exact canopies, and you notice what I did. I laid it out, I laid the piece out oversized a little bit by the thickness of the tape, but not down at the bottom. You see how the bottom has a kind of a straight up and down, and further up the canopy it has more of a curve, a slant back. And what I want to do is try to get more of a slant back. It just makes it look more prototypical. Now I could move this just as an example, and I can change that angle. A lot of people don't know you can do this. If you use this part up here, it's going to be one angle, and as you move it back here, if you trace the same part, the slope in the front changes, and you can get it a lot more prototypical, a lot more looking like the real Miss Ashley, just by a little manipulation here. And it's quite a slant backwards on the real plane. Around the edge, before I glue this in, I have the shape of one. I'm just taking one of these little Tower Hobbies razor pins, oh, Hobby Lobby, I'm sorry, put a million little holes around. It just gives a little tooth so that the epoxy will sit right in place. And by having that, I've got the curve that I want right now and a relatively nice fit. And this is a good, no matter what shape or size canopy, get holes along the perimeter, just lets the epoxy get a little bit better tooth. And it really does help the epoxy get a little bit of a grip. Now I just want to get all the final fits. I'll mix up some epoxy, put it in the ditch with a toothpick, basically make sure my hand has nothing on it, and just get it right in position. The choices I have, and I'm not going to use it, is to cover the outside of the canopy with tape so I don't get fingerprints on it, because I want to get a really, really accurate alignment down here. So what I'm going to do is try to real carefully fill a ditch with epoxy and then babysit this for, I don't know, 10-15 minutes, how long it's going to take for the epoxy to kick off. Now one of the things you could do if you had a black interior is mix a little black dye in the epoxy so that any that oozed in would be black. Obviously this is green and I don't have that color dye, so I'll forget about that. And then we can use the clear epoxy. I'll tape the canopy off once it's dry and then build that little fillet around the edge. And we're going to be making in parts a new Aeropoxy light fillet, and this is probably one of the things that we'll put on that separate tape making that fillet. Now one of the things, the babysitting part of this, yeah, you could put tape on it or whatever, but I think if you just hold it with your hand. Another thing too is In the past, I've tried to put some of the glue on the canopy and some on the cockpit. Well, I don't like that idea either. I want to get it all on the airframe itself. And you can see now I have a nice little toothpick here. Just get that ditch filled. And then I'll get to press it in once. No matter what, I don't want to pick it back off, and then I'll have all those little beads of epoxy. Yeah, we're starting right now. In fact, we're starting another how to use Aeropoxy Light video, because we're going to be using a lot of Aeropoxy Light on making the fillets on this plane. And we've learned a lot of little tricks in using the material. There's too much to put on one tape. Anything that I've put too much on here, off. And now I get to lay the canopy in one time. Let's see how good this is going to work. Get your hands clean. Clean the inside of the canopy. Ah, look at this, he drops it. See, you get nervous. Okay, it's right in the ditch now. I want to keep my hands off the bottom there. And I'll just hold on to this now. I think we've kind of captured the essence of what we wanted to in this video. And I hope you've gotten some good ideas and that you'll enjoy your next canopy detailing. Now we have the overall side profile I was looking for. Just going to make sure this... Now, one final tip. If this were to be a little crooked or in some way you're not happy with it, before this sets up, or really within the first hour that's drying, you could just warm this with a hairdryer and move it, squeeze it, whatever. I think we've done a pretty good job there. And the nice part is, if we decide on the carbon fiber fuselage, which I don't know what we're going to do as far as this goes, I was thinking of making a carbon fiber piece, in which case there'd be no canopy. But just so we'd have a lot of choices, since we already have a mold for this, and we know not everybody's going to want to make a carbon fiber fuselage or a wood, we have a lot of choices then. We can put this part on, you know, an SV11. It doesn't even matter. Again, thanks for joining us, and please share the tapes. Share the information. Write some articles for Stunt News with all the little stuff you know. And in the end, obviously, we're all going to be better off. Someday you decide to do a semi-scale plane, or one with some exceptional detailing, or more than the average, or something that'll best be a challenge to you. I hope that the information you just got will well, make it more enjoyable anyway. See you on the next tape. And just keep in mind, the canopy of any plane is the focal point. People walk over to your plane at appearance judging or wherever at the nets. Most I see you look right at the cockpit. And boy, if you ever want to read a great book, read that book, Fly Low, Fly Fast. Wow, loving that book. So you could even use these canopy parts if you were making a Red Baron type of an RB-51. And who knows, maybe on some future more scale detailed model we'll attempt one of these slider canopies similar to the Seafire or Keith Drossel's RB5. Now, even our original Spitfire had some pretty sexy scooping and some nose scooping. And this is one of the next projects we're going to work on, is the nose scooping. And Kent, I can't wait to see your new ship. Trust me. I know you're going to do a great cockpit. You had a great one in this Strega. The original information that's on this video really dates back as far as Harold Price walking me through the basics, helping me in a time of my life when I really had no resources at all except a bicycle and a lot of energy. President Canopy calling. Look at this. I can't even finish my video without somebody calling. And even if you decide to paint the canopy on, hey, just being aware of how, look at this. This is like phone tag today. Can't finish my canopy.
And it is no surprise, the gentle sparkle of the stars in your eyes. How I love you.
See you on the next tape, guys. Thanks.